For our last storyteller tonight, we have Kaitlin. And Kaitlin has the special honor of being the very first multi-venue storyteller for me. She first joined us down in Louisville back in April, and that's when I first really got to meet Kaitlin. I'd met her before at Garage Brewed, albeit briefly, and it was a crazy time for me at that event because you all are incredible and wonderful and kept me very busy at my table. For that, I'm extremely thankful. So along the way, I got to meet Kaitlin there, and like I said, she joined us in Louisville for that theme, which was Wrenched, and fantastic story. Please check her story out on YouTube. Kaitlin has the special honor of being a first in 2 locations, and I'm really excited to hear her story here because she was completely captivating and engaging in Louisville, so I'm really excited to see what she's going to do here on her home territory. So please give a warm welcome to Kaitlin.
So I feel like the bar just got set concerningly high. I don't know about all that, but I did speak in Louisville, which makes sense because I do zigzag between these 2 locations a lot. And it's kind of a long story, but it did involve a spectacular crash. I have more spectacular crash stories, and they each were very memorable firsts. But I thought for this, I would go back to when I was first trying to figure this out, before I knew any motorcycle people, and even before I really understood that I was a motorcycle person, and was just trying to figure this out for the first time. It was November of 2019. I was still in college, trying to do my senior year at Ohio University. And instead of studying, I was on the phone lying to my parents. I was lying to them, and I felt bad about it, because they're the kind of parents you don't really need to lie to most of the time. And I felt even worse because I was lying to try and get their Toyota Tundra from them, under false pretenses. And I was doing this because I had just, against their explicit and repeated advice, bought a motorcycle. And so I needed this truck, and I really needed them to not know why. So I came up with, at the time, seemed like a very convincing lie. I was like, yeah, I need to borrow your truck to help my friend move some furniture. She's moving apartments in Athens, and we need a truck bed for that. And I'm like, that's foolproof. No one could possibly see through this. And there's like a long pause on the phone. And my mom's like, let me talk to your father about that. And I'll tell you how that resolved. But before that, there was a series of events that got me even this far to where I was trying to scheme my way into a truck so that I could move this motorcycle. And also the problem there was that I had only ever ridden twice in my life. 3 years prior, day 1 and day 2 of my MSF class. And the second problem is that the motorcycle I had just purchased in a 21-year-old moment of financial genius was 100 miles from where I lived. What I do in my time is just create these weird little scenarios, these little catch-22s, and then try to like Houdini my way back out of them. I'm sure there's a name for that in the DSM-5, but I've not yet been diagnosed. So back before that, though, when I was still trying to take the MSF class back in 2017, I had to get gear. And that put me in line to do the mortifying ordeal of having to try on gear in a motorcycle shop. I was 18. I had never ridden a motorcycle at that point, and I was standing outside Joe's cycle shop in Dayton, Ohio, feeling deeply silly for being there. I was looking in there and I was like, I don't want to do this. This feels like walking into the men's locker room at the rec center. It's like, maybe it's not technically illegal, but I feel the consequences will be dire. But I'm like, well, everything I'm trying to do is on the other side of this experience, so here we go. So I kind of like snuck in, like hoping no one would see me. And it's a dealership, so everyone immediately sees me and starts asking me a lot of questions. And I'm like already kind of backing towards the door. Like, I'm not up for this. And they're like, oh, what kind of bike are you looking to get? And all these questions. And at that point, I thought I might be a sport bike girl. And I'll let you all ponder that alternative reality. And I've been looking at Yamaha's R-Series. confused, and I didn't quite understand how the names worked. But I remembered that an R6 was bigger than an R3, therefore the smallest one, the one I wanted, must be, and I said very confidently, Yamaha R1. And now this guy knew he couldn't laugh like that. He had sales to make, and it was my life. And so he kind of looked me up and down and was like, good for you. And I knew in that moment that I already answered the question wrong, I just didn't know how. So I was like, this is just great for me. I'm so glad I chose to do this with my time. So I found my way back to the helmets, and I'm trying shit on, and I'm glad no one has any more questions for me, because clearly I cannot answer them. And I hear it stomping behind me, and I turn around in terror, still holding up this jacket I was going to try on, and there's this bearded giant staring right at me, and I'm like, how have I angered this person? And he's like, man, those Joe Rocket jackets are great. And he's like speaking as if he's on the other side of the store, and he's right in my face. And that is what will happen if you don't wear hearing protection. It could be you. And so he's yelling, I'm frozen in place, as if I hold still, he won't be able to see me. And he goes into this monologue right in my face, like, I went sliding down the road at 65 miles per hour. I had to lay her down in some gravel. I slid until I hit a guardrail and broke my leg in 2 places, but I didn't have a bit of road rash on me. And I'm just standing there like, do I know you? Why are you talking to me? I didn't understand this is a standard mode of communication among motorcyclists. And that my mere presence in the store was enough to engage in this dialogue. At the time, though, I was deeply afraid. And I also was thinking, what was that about a guardrail and a broken leg? So I managed to get a helmet, and the emotional toll was high. And I take the MSF class, I barely pass it. The instructor, this wise little dude with a scar on his neck from a lug nut that came off a truck. He had 1,000 scared straight stories. He passed me, and then he grabbed me on the shoulder in the class and said, if you don't get your shit together, you're gonna die. I'm gonna die anyway. And so after that was my freshman year, I was waiting for some kind of like middle stage, something I could do before having to buy a full-size street bike, since I really felt that riding a 3/4 scale motorcycle in a parking lot was maybe not the preparation I needed. And what I eventually realized is that there was no middle stage. I was going to do this all the way or not at all. And I started looking on Cycle Trader, and then something terrifying happened, which is I saw a perfect motorcycle that I could afford. This was horrifying, because now I knew that the choice was mine, and I couldn't just be passive about this anymore. I could either make it happen or I could not. So I began making another one of my little schemes. Is that I'm a full-time college student, I don't have really any money or resources, and I didn't know there was community around this. I thought it was just a thing that individual deranged people did. I did not know they congregated. I did not know how social they were. And so I'm just on my own trying to figure this out. I knew exactly one person who had a motorcycle, and so I hatched this plan that I was going to ask her if I could maybe ride her Rebel 250 in the parking lot, then I would go look at this bike that I might spend all of my net worth on. And so she's like, sure. I get to Dayton, and I'm going to ride this bike, and we pulled out of the garage, and I froze. And this was the first time that day that my plan went wrong. I was like, oh my God, the bike grew. Because what I didn't know is that she had upgraded from a Rebel 250 to a Suzuki S40 Boulevard, the bike previously known as the Savage, which is still technically considered a beginner's bike, but to me, a person who had ever only ridden a tiny little MSF bike, it looked monstrous. I was like, what do I do with that? That looks like it could hurt somebody. Just look at that thing, and it had like a big batwing fairing on it, so it looked even huger. It was like fluffed up to extra size, to be extra scary. And so I'm like, well, all right, fine, I'll get in my car and I'll follow you over to the parking lot. My friend Savannah kind of scoffs at me, and she's like, I don't want to go to the parking lot. You can just ride it here. And here is a narrow residential street in Dayton with a median, so it's 2 narrower one-way lanes lined with parked cars. And I'm beginning to sense the odds are shifting away from my favor with this. I was like, I had a very carefully laid plan, and so far things are deviating into a new and unknown direction for me. But I'm like, you know what, Mom, I didn't raise a quitter. So I fire up this terrifying bike, and the one giant piston is slamming up and down, shaking the entire bike. I've got my hands way up here on these stupid ape hangers, like, what the fuck am I doing? And at this point, Ashley appears. Ashley is Savannah's dad. He's this tall contractor in a Harley t-shirt and wraparound dark sunglasses. And he's a Harley man, but he bought this puny, pathetic Japanese motorcycle for his daughter to learn on. And his keen motorcyclist senses were telling him that something really funny was about to happen. So Ashley posts up on the porch, and that was when I knew that I was actually fucked. A spectator has entered the arena. A witness. And I'm like, I'm already here, man. It's too late. I just had to go meet God. So I take off and I teeter down to the first stop sign, a total of like 3 yards, and I'm like, well, that was successful. And the very first thing I have to do is turn left onto this narrow street. I'm a person who has operated a clutch twice. I do not really remember how, and that kind of familiarization thing I was looking for in a parking lot is not to be found on a real street with real cars on it. So I try, I let the clutch out, and I kind of start to teeter again with these stupid bars into a corner, and I start to fall in and lose my balance. And then 2 really cool things happen at once. Number 1, I goose the throttle, and number 2, the big single happily righted itself and took off straight for the bumper of a parked car. And I was like, no, I've seen this video on YouTube. It can't be like this. I can't go out this way. And all that MSF stuff was just gone from my brain. This is just pure lizard brain panic. And I'm like, there's witnesses. And so I did the only thing in my brain left to do, which is I pulled in the clutch in the front brake, and I almost came to a nice stop, and instead I stopped just short of the bumper and fell over into the curb. Just a really nice slam dunk, ride her down. And some lady who was watering her plants didn't understand that she had seen an idiot fall over. She thought she had seen a motorcycle crash, and she thought I was dead. She came running over. And meanwhile, Ashley, who knows better, is slowly sauntering across the street to inspect his daughter's bike and his daughter's idiot friend. And this lady's like, oh my God, are you okay? And I'm like, look away. Forget I was ever here. And I'm like, yes, and we stand the bike up, and it is mostly fine except for a singular bent foot peg, and I'm looking at Ashley in genuine terror. Looking up at Ashley, who was like 6'5". And I am promising to pay for this bent foot peg and also to go away forever. Thank you for your time. You will never see me again. I am so sorry. And Savannah pipes up and she's like, well, I'm glad you messed it up before I could. You're so welcome. Thank you for that. And so I'm like, well, I'm not going to go look at that bike today. Fuck this. Fuck having dreams and ambitions. I'm going back to my dorm room to drink all this away. And then Savannah says, well, you can go try again in a parking lot if you want. And I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, I don't want. I want to leave. But there's like a sunk costs fallacy going on in my head too. It's like, I'm already here. And like the worst case scenario has almost already happened. And if the actual worst case scenario happens, I'll be dead and it won't be my problem. So let's go to the parking lot. And so I get back in my car to follow her over. She's on the bike. And I'm expecting, considering how much she didn't want to do the parking lot, that it's like far away. No. She makes one turn, goes 2 blocks, and there is the hugest, most beautiful church parking lot I've ever seen in my life. And at this point I felt a little less guilty. I was like, okay, well you made choices too. I told you very clearly what my level of riding was. I'm just saying. Now your foot peg's bent. You know, actions, consequences. So I ride around the parking lot, which was fine, because when you put a big gear in a parking lot, they're generally fine. It wasn't a very satisfying "I told you so" though, because I was the one who like face planted into a curb. So I couldn't really take too much satisfaction in that. And it was at that point when I'm done with that, Savannah's gonna go to work. Ashley had followed us over to the parking lot just in case of more entertainment, so he's also still hanging out. And we're all about to go our separate ways, and I'm like, well, thank you, this was very emotionally scarring. This was a horrible use of my time, thank you again. And then I said I was gonna have a friend go with me to go look at this bike, because at the time, walking into some stranger's garage to look at a motorcycle seemed like a good way to wind up on Dateline. So I had recruited the largest, malest friend I had to go with me. And it's really funny looking back, because that's like an average Thursday night for me now, is winding up in someone's garage looking at motorcycles. And back then it seemed really scary. And that guy has just backed out, so I'm like, I'm never gonna get to go see this bike. Like, everything that has happened today is pointing to that not happening. And I tell Ashley and Savannah this, and Ashley's like, I'll go with you. Ashley looks like it could be an actual bodyguard. And I'm like, let's go, Ashley. All right, let's do it. So this guy, who's never met me before, by the way, he's met me, seen me drop his daughter's bike on the ground, and has taken enough pity that he is now helping me. I didn't realize this is like par for the course with motorcyclists. And it would not be the first time that I've like shown up, crashed, and then made friends. This happened. I didn't realize I was setting a pattern. So we go up and look at this bike, and it seems even huger than the Suzuki did. It's a Versys X300. And it was really pointy and tall, and I got on it, I could only put my toes on the ground. And I was like, and just the enclosed fairing looked like a spaceship cockpit to me. I was like, get me away from this Decepticon. This is like too much. I can't handle this. But then I was kind of thinking, I was like, you know, this actually kind of works. And I've watched the Fortnite video. I've done the forum research. I know this is what I'm kind of after. And I spent a while talking to the seller, and I was so excited to like have these nerdy ADD conversations in real life. And we're talking about all these like mid-weight bikes, and Ashley's looking back and forth like, oh my god, metric bike people are such nerds. Jesus Christ, they just keep talking about like different generations of KLRs. How long is this gonna go? So I pack it up after that. I go back to Athens, and I'm just like driving like shell-shocked, just thinking about like everything I've just done. And that night I got home and I texted the guy selling the Versys, and I said, don't sell it, I'll come back with your money next week. And, oh, there's one other thing. I sat on the bike, and he's like, oh, you want to ride up and down the street? And I would love to tell you that this is where like my courage rallied, and I like went out and I rode the Versys around, had like a magical moment with it. I was like, I'm good, actually. I'm all right. I'll take your word for it. I saw the service, we're good. And so I go back to Athens, I tell them I'll take it, and that brings me back to lying to my parents to get their truck. Because again, I'm not fucking riding that thing 100 miles, man. I barely survived the parking lot. We've got a little bit of work to do. But again, I felt terrible about it. That was like more than a truck for my parents. It was like a symbol of a lot of hard work paying off. And then finally getting to have a nice life now that their kids were finally out of the house. And I just like couldn't bring myself to steal it under false pretenses to do the thing they told me not to do. But also the audacity of dads, because who do you think told me about motorcycles in the first place? Who do you think had all these stories about all the cool motorcycle riding he used to do, and then changed his tune real fast once I showed an interest? Like, we were driving once when I was in high school, and I saw a really cool bike, so I was like, oh, Dad, you know what that is? And he's like, a suicide machine. And I'm like, that is so crazy for someone who rode many, and like also my grandpa did, and my great-grandfather did, man. He had a Moto Guzzi back in the 1910s. Which I didn't learn until later, and that was like a cool flex I did not appreciate at the time. And so, I'm so ridden with guilt over this that Friday night, I'm gonna go get the truck Saturday morning and take it, get a little U-Haul trailer on it, and go spirit my bike away to Athens to hopefully learn to ride it in more controlled conditions. I called him Friday night, and I'm like, I may have slightly disassembled with you. And there's a long silence, and they're like, do tell. And I was like, the couch was a lie, there's no couch. That was fake. I bought a motorcycle, I need your truck so I can go take it to Athens because I don't really know how to ride yet and I don't want to die that soon. And there's like a brief silence and I was like, yeah, we figured. And I'm like, what do you mean you figured? I mean, I get that I'm a somewhat predictable person, but that's like really specific. And she was like, your dad saw your helmet in your car 2 weeks ago when you came in. They gave me the truck. I went and picked up my motorcycle, I put 32,000 miles on it. And I made my dad so jealous that this year he bought a V-Strom.
And now Kaitlin makes all of us jealous with her riding of all sorts of off-trail rides. KAT twice?
Yep.
Yeah, she's a freaking badass. So I know she's inspiring me to get out to ride KAT next year. It's the Kentucky Adventure Trail that rides through what part of Kentucky?
All of it.
All of it! Yeah, all of it!
Only the bourbon part.
So here's to supportive family members, here's to supportive motorcycle community members, here's just to a freaking really awesome group of people who just enjoy being on 2 wheels, maybe 3 wheels. Thank you so much. This has been an absolutely fantastic evening. Please give a warm round of applause to each of the storytellers who are brave enough to get up here tonight. Please give them a great round of applause.